part 2 of a video series talking about transcription or learning by ear or ear training. All of those are terms that kind of talk about the same thing. That I covered a little bit in the first part. The first video, part 1, was just an introduction to learning songs by ear. And then we kind of talked a little bit about why it's important for pretty much anyone trying to learn an instrument. This video focuses more on why learning things by ear training, is really, really important for those of us that are starting to learn the style of music that we call jazz music, the historical style, and then the way that we play it now in jazz bands at our schools. The thing to remember is that really learning an instrument is similar to learning a language, like learning to speak. You know, we learn our ABCs, and then that's like the note names. We learn kind of how to put the alphabet together to make words. So that's when we're starting to kind of read notes and rhythms on paper. And then finally, we start to kind of read sentences, right? When we're learning to read any language, we start to kind of put the words together into sentences. That's kind of when we get better at reading sheet music and looking ahead in the music. So that's kind of like the written connection, right? But when we learn a language, there's also all of the things that we kind of pick up just from hearing people talk around us, like accents or a person's phrasing, how fast or slow we talk, when we've kind of put strong emphasis or, you know, heavier words in a sentence, and just the way that we kind of speak and the rhythm that we speak. We don't really read that off a page. We get that by kind of hearing the way that other people talk. This is the same thing with music, and particularly with jazz, because jazz is a style of music that has a long history of being learned just by ear. There's a large part of this style of music that it wasn't written down in the same way that like our normal band music was. It was really taught by listening to each other or somebody teaching a part without writing it down, either playing it to the person or singing it to the person or something like that. One example that I could use to kind of try to demonstrate that is a song by Dave Brubeck called Take 5. Now, the beginning of the melody is all eighth notes. They're played in a swung feel. So if I just know that much, the melody would kind of sound something like this. Right? Now, here's how it actually sounds on the recording. Does it sound the same as the way I played it? Well, there are a couple differences. One, I'm playing it on a tenor saxophone. That melody is played on an alto saxophone. But the part that I really want to emphasize is the way that those notes are played. Now, if I play it again by myself, trying to kind of match the style and the accent that saxophone is using, saxophonist named Paul Desmond, if I try to match it a little better, I can change that melody and it sounds more like this. I'll do that again. I might be exaggerating some of the things that he's doing to a certain extent, but you get the point that really for the melodies in this style of music to sound the way that they're supposed to, we have to match things that aren't always written down on the page. What is swing? Like how much swing? A do-ba-do-ba-do or do-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-da. There's like different weights that we can put to that. The way that the notes are kind of accented, do-da-do-da-da, all of those kinds of things. We can kind of write down, right? We have accents in written music, but we have slurs also. That's another part of this melody that I think is kind of interesting. When I listen to the original version, I'll rewind it. There's almost a different kind of tonguing thing that's happening partway through. Almost staccato, but is it? Staccato being the dots that we kind of see above some of the notes in our music. So maybe some of these things that I'm talking about related to the jazz style, we can write down, but you're not going to see, like in your jazz band music, a line of eighth notes with all of these things kind of marked in. It would be very complicated and hard to read also. So these are things that we just kind of pick up by listening to the music and then also trying to learn by ear, transcribing melodies in the jazz style, or learning them by ear. This is the idea of kind of learning how to speak the language correctly. Now, we don't always have to have the exact song recording that we're playing in jazz band to be able to play that song correctly. I mean, it helps. But the point that I'm making here is just the more that you listen to this music, any songs in this style that are similar to the styles of the songs that you're playing in jazz band, the better you will be at speaking the language, even though it's just kind of reading the notes on the page. What about the notes that are not on the page? Now I'm talking about improvisation or solos, right? Well, learning by ear and transcription is really, really important for that too. If we go back to kind of the language comparison, yes, when we're young, when we're kids, we do kind of figure out how to speak by listening to people around us, or we just kind of pick things up from the people around us. But sometimes we will, well, not even just sometimes, often and regularly, we pick up the exact things that they're saying. We learn phrases from grown-ups. There are particular sentences and words that are put together that we learn just from the people around us. Exact sentences. This is the same with learning how to solo and improvise. If we're trying to figure out how to kind of speak in a solo, the best way to get used to doing that is to first learn some sentences and phrases from other people. In this case, it would be other soloists. So the example that I'm going to use for this actually is a song called Blues Walk by a saxophonist named Lou Donaldson. Now, one of the reasons that I'm choosing this one is because the language that he's using, or the parts of the language that he's using in this song, is based on almost always one blues scale. A blues scale might be something that you guys have started to learn, but if not, it's just a particular group of notes. It's probably better to start, if you're going to try to start to learn some sentences and get better at learning by ear, and I mentioned this in the first video, trying to choose something where you can tell it's put together in a slightly more simple way. Maybe there are a lot of things that are repeated. It's just easier to start to kind of get our ears around those kinds of things. Blues Walk is one of those songs where it's a smaller group of notes. There's a lot of repetition. I don't think it's simpler or easier in any way. I think for Mr. Donaldson to have been able to put together this song in this very interesting way with a small group of notes, I don't think it's that easy to do. But for us, in terms of learning, it's a great place to start. This is another song where he's playing it on an alto saxophone. So I wanted to kind of intentionally use a tenor to demonstrate, kind of like I did in the first video, how sometimes it's okay to try to learn songs by ear that aren't on your exact instrument, but you may need to do some higher or lower versions and jump to different versions of the notes, different octaves, as we usually put it. Okay, so here's the beginning of Blues Walk. Now this is the beginning of the main melody, which we'll use for now. But keep in mind also that for soloing and improvisation, we also kind of want to hear his ideas when he's actually playing his solo. So that might be something else to like look into. But for now, we're just going to work with kind of the beginning melody section. So here it is from the beginning again. And there it is. Now, if I'm on tenor, again, from the first video, we would probably want to try to go through this one note at a time. I'll just kind of cut to it because I know this melody. So it's basically using a concert F blues scale. That would be a D blues scale for altos, and then a G blues scale for tenors. Now that is the lower version of that melody, right? I have some decisions to make. I could start up here, which would be closer to his actual notes. Or I can start down lower and do it from what we would call the lower octave. Right? I'll have to probably relearn that one a little bit. So we've got a couple pieces of this melody here that if we learned those and then got to kind of be in a place where we kind of know, really know those melodies, these are tools. These are musical sentences that then I can put in my own blues solo if I was playing a song in my jazz band that was, required me to use on tenor at least a G blues scale. Now I have these musical sentences. I can put them in different orders. Hopefully I'll continue to learn some other musical sentences, and then I can kind of put those together. This is hopefully encouraging you to go out there and start to kind of use your ears and pull some of those musical sentences on your own. So that's it for part 2 of transcription. As I said at the end of the first video, it can be very frustrating. A lot of pausing on whatever platform you're using to play the song. A lot of pausing, a lot of rewinding, going back, listening very closely. But the more that you do ear training, the more that you practice learning by ear, the easier it gets and the faster it gets. So don't give up. And happy practicing.